top 1% of software developers in the world earn over $250,000 a year, and that's a life-changing amount of money. And with the march forward of AI taking sort of low-level jobs, it's even more important that you climb up that ladder and get to the senior tech lead level as soon as you can. So I believe there's 4 secrets to make you a top 1% developer, and in this video I'm going to run through what they are. Stick around for number 4, because in my opinion, if you get good at that, it can put you in the top 25%. Get great at it, it'll put you in the top 10% without even focusing on the other 3. So I chat a lot on Twitter, X, about development and becoming a software developer, and I've got this thesis as well that'll help you start kind of climbing up the percentage ladder, up the percentage pyramid, to put you into sort of the top 10, the top 1% in whatever discipline you want. So for example, I want to get good at recording YouTube videos, and I also want to get good at blogging and writing blogs. So I've got this idea that if I put myself in the top 50% of YouTube video creators and sort of top 50% of blog writers with some sort of like ham-fisted maths, that automatically puts me in the top 25% worldwide as well. Then if you kind of apply that to a niche, so let's say software development, as if by magic it puts you in the top 1%. So like I said, get good at YouTube, get good at writing blog posts, apply that knowledge to a niche, software development. Hey presto, you're in the 1% club. But what about becoming a 1% developer? What will that entail? And like I said, with ChatGPT, AI popping up, you know, on what feels like an hourly basis, standing out for the crowd is more important than ever. And if you're breaking through at a junior level, I feel your pain, because it's going to be really, really difficult to sort of get in the door and then climb up that sort of ladder. And if you're already in the software development space, you need to get yourself higher up that pyramid. So I talked about a lot of different skills that you could develop as a coder that would help you in the corporate world, but I'd never really sort of put them into a set of principles until I saw this one tweet. And it said, as a dev, if you were a mentor, what advice would you give to someone just starting out coding? Now, a lot of people give really good solid advice, but for me, I kind of went down a different route and tried to look at it from more of a high level and sort of look at my career, you know, 20 plus years of working as a software developer, working for FTSE 100 companies, working for startups, starting my own businesses, side projects, software development businesses. And I just was like, right, well, what can you do to put yourself in the top 25%? And what can you do to put yourself in the top sort of 1%? And it came down to sort of 4 principles that I've realized over my career that I think if you get really good at, it'll just skyrocket you and fast track your career and get to that top 1%, get to that $250,000 a year. So let's run through the 4 principles. So number 1, learn clean code principles. Now, I'm not going to go into sort of all the clean code principles or the solid framework, but for me, looking back early in my career, I learned not how to write clean code, to write good code. So in my first job, straight out of university, I learned a lot about building software, but mainly how not to do it. And it was the business was all about getting stuff out the door, regardless of the standard of the work. As long as it worked, that's all that matters. But there was no time for upskilling, developing yourselves as a developer. The code became very, very complicated, huge beasts of applications, and they were like a nightmare to maintain and build upon. There was one particular screen. It was actually the sales systems payment processor. It was a monster, and no one wanted to touch it. We're all shit scared that it would break and stop working. But after leaving that company and starting on sort of getting more experience, I realized that I'd been writing awful, unmanageable code. And that's when I started sort of going on to Pluralsight, learning about clean code principles and the solid framework. And it'll put you ahead of a lot of developers. One thing that happened to me is sort of I got fast tracked through quite a number of promotions without even applying for it and sort of focusing on it. It was just down to a few things, but I think one of them was like was able to write clean code. So my boss then, you know, wanted me at the senior level for a lot of different reasons. Ultimately, they wanted to take pressure off themselves at being able to pass across this knowledge to junior developers. And I even got to a point where my boss would be running code katas, and he was getting me to help out run it and sort of give across the principles why we were doing what we were doing. And they want to try and manage a maintainable code base, because if they've got to get back on the tools, they want to be able to up and run with the code as quick as possible. They've probably been around longer than you, and they may last longer than you in the business, and they want to be able to get people up and running, you know, regardless of what the skill set is. They just want a maintainable code base. And ultimately, it comes back, one of the important principles for me is maintaining my own code. Like I said, I've got my own startups and my own software-based businesses. Sometimes I come back to code and go like, what was I thinking? But with clean code, even if you've forgotten what you've done, you can actually get up and running in no time. And it allows you to sort of go so quickly. Non-technical folk will think you're some sort of like coding machine, churning out new features, getting bug fixes in there. There's nothing more valuable than a company wants is someone who can get stuff out into production, ship and ship often. That's what the business wants. Now, people may think that's not important, but there's a story I've got about a guy I used to work with many, many years ago, again in that original company that I first started for. He kept asking for a pay rise, and he ultimately thought he was smarter than other people. And maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but he kept asking for a pay rise and saying, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm amazing, I'm amazing, I'm amazing. But after 18 months, he'd not put one single line of code into production. So what's the moral of the story? Well, the business let him go not long after that. You know, if you want to become this top 1% developer, you've got to start delivering high quality code as quick as possible. So principle number 2, become amazing at TDD, BDD. So TDD is test-driven development. BDD is behavior or business-driven development. Now, we have this argument a lot, depending on if you're an indie hacker or you're starting your own thing. Is these principles really important for getting stuff out the door? For your own projects, maybe, maybe not. I think they are, but from a corporate point of view, TDD, BDD are professional coding standards. And a lot of the principles go back to what I talked about in point number 1, sort of what the people want from the business, and a win for your boss and the engineering team. And it's a win for you as well, because ultimately you have confidence in the code you're writing, and to prove that what you produce for the business is what they ask for, and it's amazing, it's valuable. What businesses ultimately want are problem solvers. Now, it comes down to legacy code. There's a lot of definitions out there about legacy code. But for me, it's any code that doesn't have unit tests wrapped around it. So it's not about the age of the code. If you wrote a line of code yesterday and there's no unit tests around it, there's no testing around it, that is legacy code. So imagine this, you've started a new job, you find the code base is about 10 years old, there's lots of moving parts, but the business relies on this code base for its income. Everyone, again, is shit scared of touching it, including you, but the business needs a new feature coding into it, or they're dead in the water. If you go to them, yeah, no problem. I'll work with like people in the business and non-technical folk to make sure what we've got now still works and it's maintainable. They'll love you. So you'll start by writing unit tests, BDD tests, make sure the current functionality is working as expected, and that you can sort of test it in your pipeline or whatever that may be. And it's about then turning that lead into gold, because what you've done here is you've turned legacy code into manageable, maintainable code. So then you could work with the business further, start working on a new feature, write new tests around it, TDD, BDD, showing that these tests fail, showing that, you know, what you're actually building is what the business wants. And then you can start coding against these tests and ultimately get the new feature out, save the company's bacon. Now, I know you think this may be far-fetched, but I've actually done this many times. And that's the true power of learning about test-driven and behavior-driven development. So point number 3, become language agnostic. What do I mean by that? Well, again, going back to that first job where I learned a lot, we were delivering all the rubbish code. The development team was split between sort of 2 programming languages. Me and about 3 others were desktop-based software development. I was coding in Visual Basic. Yes, I am that old. And sort of 4 or 5 other of the team were PHP web front end developers. But I bet you've heard this before, that there was always an argument between the guys doing Visual Basic and the PHP guys, which one was better. But for me, I didn't get involved. I didn't really care. And what happened was, one task that I was working on, it needed a back-end processor, and we had sort of a LAMP stack, and we used a lot of PHP for our back-end processing. We had a dedicated server that did all this processing, and they were taking up developing this new portal. So I just decided to take on the job, and I ended up like learning PHP. And at the end of the day, code is code. So if you want to become a top 1% developer, it comes back to sort of the thesis that I talked about at the start of the video. And my example was getting good at blogging and getting good at recording YouTube videos. But the same applies to sort of software development. If you get really good at 2 programming languages, will that put you in the top 25%? But then if you become that skilled that you can pick up and learn any programming language, apply clean code principles, apply the TDD, BDD principles that we talked about, well, you'll clean up. A new programming language becomes popular, it doesn't matter. A new framework becomes popular, it doesn't matter. A new technology becomes popular, it doesn't matter. You've exposed yourself to enough programming languages, and now you have the confidence and all these skills from the first two principles. You're able to sidestep and go and use this new programming language. It doesn't matter what business or domain you want to go and work with, or what industry pays the big bucks. Regardless of the tech stack, you'll just be able to go and get up and running with it. And again, you'll be able to command the top 1%. And to re-emphasize this, again, be a problem solver, not a problem creator. If they've got, say, an old tech stack and you go, I've never used that program language, but I'll give it a go, they're just going to love you. So we're coming to the fourth and final principle, principle number 4, which I believe is the most important. And that is to be able to communicate complex stuff. I truly believe that being able to communicate complex stuff to non-technical folk is a superpower. No matter which businesses I've worked for, I've always been able to sort of build up a relationship within not only the team I worked in, but across the business and other departments. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. I could bang my own drum and stuff, but this video is about you becoming a top 1% developer, not about me sort of cock swinging. But to hammer my point home, I want to give you a quote from Warren Buffett, the top investor of Berkshire Hathaway. If you can't communicate, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. Nothing happens. But as you know, working in tech, writing code and building software is complicated. It takes a certain type of person, a bit more of a logical mind. Now, I might offend you with this, but because we're certain types of people, we aren't always great at getting our point across and communicating. I've even seen tech folk get angry because other people in the business don't understand what they deem simple. We need to apply empathy to other people in the business, because domain knowledge isn't the same as being tech savvy. You know, in the modern software development world now, you're going to be working with product owners, delivery managers, people who have a lot of domain knowledge. And it's their job to figure out what the business needs to work and function and what the development team needs to build. Sorry to say this, but they won't be technical, not to the point that some developers would like. Again, I worked for a company that didn't have any product management team at all. I had to do all this myself, work out what tech support wanted, what sales wanted, what marketing wanted, talking to the accounts team. Do you think a highly skilled, high-flying salesman is going to know what you're on about? Nor should he, but he'll know what the customer is asking for and wanting, and it's your job to figure that out and get it implemented. Because ultimately, communication is a two-way street. The first part of this is getting good at listening. If someone knows you're listening, you understand their struggles, and you can relate back to them in a simple way, they'll love you. Honestly, they'll love you. This is one of the things I think it's so important, this. Ultimately, I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent, but the corporate world has a hell of a lot of gossip. But gossip isn't always negative. If people start gossiping about you and they're going, he's such a great guy, he just understands what we want, he's great to work with, that'll get spread around and people will know about how amazing you are. Management will start taking notice. So that's it. Like, first part is just listen, understand, and relay stuff back to them. The second part for me of this is being able to communicate the complicated in a simple manner. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but my top tip is to try and liken it to something they understand. I remember once being in this meeting and a fellow developer went on and talked all this technical jargon at someone, explaining how complicated it'll be, why it's difficult, the ins and outs of the tech stack. The poor girl just looked shell-shocked and didn't know what to do. She won't go to him again because she'll just be like, I'm just going to get shouted at and I'll just be completely confused. But I always remember the same girl, a week later, she was like a kid at Christmas. And I'm going to say Christmas because I'm doing recording this just before Christmas, but I used an analogy of sending Christmas cards to explain what we were actually doing as a business. When you send out Christmas cards, you send almost the same identical card to everyone, with the slight difference being the name at the top of the card being different. And this is what the basic concept of the system we're working on did, just in a different industry at scale. And it was amazing. You saw this like light bulb appear above her head to see the difference once she kind of understood what we were doing in a concept that she understood. It just skyrocketed her reputation in the business, and which started growing and growing and growing, which in turn then grew mine because she was like, oh, it's because Phil's up me out. And at the end of the day, the less friction between figuring out what's needed to hit the business goals and getting that delivered in a professional, timely manner, the better. So if you become amazing at communicating, you become the grease that reduces this friction. And ultimately, it means you can become unsackable. You can become this top 1% developer. So there you have it, my 4 principles to becoming a top 1% developer. Number 1, learn clean code principles. Number 2, get amazing at TDD and BDD. Number 3, become language agnostic. And number 4, the most important one, be able to communicate complex stuff. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it helps you become a top 1% developer. I'd love it if you could subscribe to my channel and also click the little bell icon. I'm hoping to help other software developers and indie hackers get moving with their career and software-based projects. Catch you later, Bill and Ted.